You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the podcast, we were kicking around ideas, and this is one that is one that I know I have to address quite frequently, and I'm sure Zach has to answer it every so often too. It's how do you feel about children in church? And so Zach, as you get asked that question, how do you usually respond?
Certainly. I am a big proponent, as a pastor, but also as a dad, of having my kiddos in church. And certainly there are seasons in their life where it's good for them to be in the nursery or, somewhere where they can toddle and play and be loud and not be distracting. But I think that ends early in their life. I don't know. We as parents have, because we were parents before we were pastors, always had our kids in church. Like I said, until they became mobile. Then they got to go to their nursery for a little bit, but we certainly brought them back out because we wanted them to learn and be comfortable in the sanctuary, which meant for us, which did not meant to sit down and shut up and not be seen, right? It very much meant for us is to be comfortable, to giggle, to play, to be good sitting there for however long we were in worship. Now, as a pastor, I take this crying and movement is life. It shows us a lot of life in the church, and so I do not practice the bring your kids up for children time, do children's time with them, and then send them to a different room. We definitely like to send them back to their parents, back to the sanctuary to continue to worship with all of us. And I think that's really, really important. I've worked with a lot of churches, my own and not my own, just in consultation, asking the question or answering the question of, well, why don't we have young people? And often, as we look back through history in those churches, they have traditionally or for long periods of time sent kids out of the room. And when you ask those kids who did that, their response is, we aren't welcome here. We always had to leave. And the one times that we were welcome here is when you made us run PowerPoint, right? Or gave us a job to do. Otherwise, you wanted us in a different room. And so now that we're adults, or now that we're in high school, or have kids of our own, we haven't felt welcome in this space. And so I've taken that to heart as a dad, as a pastor, and do everything that I can do to make sure that our space, that our sanctuary is welcoming to kiddos, which means they can color. We have toys available for them, that are on their level. We have short tables that they can run over and grab crayons and coloring sheets and little fidget toys and whatever it is they want to play with. And certainly encourage them to bring their own and bring snacks and coffee and, coffee for the parents, but, snacks and juice and things. So creating that welcoming environment, and then having the conversation with people if and when they are distracted or bothered by kiddos of, here's our reality. Got to have kids here. Our future is dim.
Yeah, when I'm asked that question, I always point out when people usually complain is, did you hear that child or did you see that child? Yeah. And my response is no.
Right.
But I did hear the Werther's original wrapper being unwrapped, or the cough drop wrapper being unwrapped, or
you whispering about what you were going to do for lunch,
or you complaining about the hymn selection for the Sunday, or I heard those things, or your cell phone going off. I heard those things,
right?
But children typically don't bother me. Actually, I love it. I love hearing children. I was thinking of a funeral I had recently, and I had read the scripture reading and the child yelled out a yay, and it was just like, it's like that's what church should be like. And for
Yeah.
me, and I've always been this way. I really, really, really believe that children, how else are they going to learn how to worship
Right.
God if they don't learn it from us?
Right.
And I think that what's powerful in that is part of our responsibility as believers is we sit in the pews. If if that child is baptized, we agree to raise that child.
Right.
And so how else are we going to teach them if we send them out? I've
Right.
always had a hard time with that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen it done in really well ways. I mean, I know like even Church of the Resurrection sends them out after the children's moment, and part of me is like okay with that because they do such a really good job, and they're in there for a good bulk of the service. But I also feel like that the sense of learning how to sit through a sermon, that's something we're all having to learn how to do, even post COVID. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and how to engage the sermon and how to take notes and all the things like find it in your Bible. I would I think it's one of those things that how else are we going to teach people how to worship than being in worship?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the other thing too, and Zach, you brought up a really good point. Um, not all youth know how to run technology, so don't assume just because they're young you can stick them back on the technology because they
Or
may not do it well.
or
Uh,
want to,
or
right?
yeah, that too. However, they may have some gifts that you can utilize in your worship experience, such as singing, reading poetry, reading whatever, doing a
Mm-hmm.
drama. Like, one of my things that I say, and I'm saying it in this, and I feel like it's still a new appointment. I mean, I've only been here a year, so I still
Yeah.
feel new. But one of the things I find myself saying, and I've said it in every appointment, the more people we have on stage means the more people we'll have in the pews. And so we have
Right.
to create spaces that allow for a diverse group of people to be engaging in worship. It shouldn't just be the pastor and the liturgist or the pastor and the choir
Right.
director, or however you're set up. That you need to provide space for multiple voices to have a space, and children and youth need to have that space, and even young adults. Um, and I think that that's a powerful thing. You should do, if you've sent kids to camp, that next Sunday should be a camp testimony, where they saw God
Right.
at work. Even the little ones, like nothing makes a congregation's heart warm when the little kid gets up and just talks about camp, and you can prompt them, like you can interview them and prompt
Mm-hmm.
them so that way they're not fumbling around, or work with them, coach them, because how
Right.
else are we going to teach them to have that capability of being able to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
make
Right.
them feel comfortable. I think that that's a vital thing as we think about that, and we think about having, how do we get young families? Well, they've got to feel like they're being engaged, and what a better way of doing that than inviting them
Right.
up to be a part of the service.
Right. Well, in one of my favorite places to involve children, especially children, is during communion. Inviting them to come up and serve communion with us is one of my favorite things to do, um, because gosh, they just do it well, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and they have fun with it. And sure, maybe they don't say the things that we think they're supposed to say, but it's a sacred moment to receive the gifts of love and grace through bread and juice from our kids, right? It's a big deal. And to have them come up and do that and give them that sacred space to do so, and to give massive pieces of bread and tiny pieces of bread, and just the joy that I see through them, in getting to take on that responsibility of that space and worship is huge. And like you said, there's a teaching moment in bringing people, making not making, but bringing people in the sanctuary and having everybody there, right? There's a teaching moment there for our kids and how to worship. There's a teaching moment there for us as leaders to remember that all age groups are on the room, that we design and preach in a way that all ages can hear. All ages can hear the good news. All ages can hear our stories. And we do, if we only have adults in the room, we only preach to adults. When we remember there are kids and youth and families in the room, we preach differently. We lead worship differently. And we do it in a way that all people can can hear and experience the love and grace of God in ways that they do, rather than just that straight across the board monotone or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It's important for us to remember that as leaders.
Yeah, and I think we get so caught up in things that it's just easy for us to push children and youth aside in worship, when we really do need to work. And that's something I'm trying to figure out. What can we do better, or what can we do more to include children and youth in worship in a way that's meaningful, and utilizing their gifts. And I definitely want to encourage people not to do, don't put a kid in where they're not going to be successful. Like, no, try to learn what the kid's gifts are, and utilize the kid's gifts. And then, because then that can even translate to adults too, where they may feel like that they can be, if they can see the kids do it, maybe they can do that. And I think that that's a powerful thing. But I also, I really firmly
and operate with grace, right?
Yes. I firmly believe that children need to be in worship, because I think it's the way that we learn. The other is, if we're doing church right, then the parents aren't there by themselves. There are other adults in there that can help them. If the kid's getting, restless, let the kid get restless. Let the kid crawl through the pews, and say, hey, do you want to sit with me? And, that kind of thing. And, provide a safe space for the kids to be in. We're getting ready to put together these boxes that I've used in the last couple of congregations that have been very helpful. And we call them children's boxes, and they have some small activities that the kids can do and connect in to church on Sunday. And, it's just a great experience. And so, for me, that's important, is to find ways that we can plug anybody and everybody into worship. And that's definitely been a challenge for me this last year in a new appointment, but I feel like we're going to get there sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So Zach,
I think so too, and it's I think it's all about making space, right? And if we can make space for our children to be active in worship and leading us in worship, we can make space for all people, right? If we can start there, start with making space for children. The other space comes, right? Instead of working from top down, I think we start with our kiddos, and I think the churches that do that well, you see a difference. You see a difference in worship. You see a difference in their community, in a lot of different ways. And so that's where I would land, is asking that question: how are we making space for our kiddos? And go from there.
Well, I think you could even just say, how are you making space for all people? Or is it the same people up on stage every Sunday? I think that's a good question to wrestle with. So we want to encourage you to go to our website at beardedtheologians.com. We have a link where you can buy things. We have a link that you can look at past episodes that we have up and available for you to listen to. We've been doing this for a while, almost probably close to over 400 episodes at this point, right? Close to it.
Getting close to 400, yeah.
And so, there's definitely a lot to choose from. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Guys, I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.